Half Hour to Health. I'm Dr. Dietrich. On today's show, we're going to be talking about women's health problems. We're going to be talking about such things as menopause. What is the fuss all about? And what about hormones? Do we really need them? We'll be discussing a lot of these particular issues today. Also, another important one, what are good vitamins for healthy bones? Well, we'll find all out about that today because my guest today on the show is Dr. Lonnie Simpson. Dr. Simpson has been counseling women and PMS and menopause problems for the last 10 years. She is the co-founder of the East Bay Menopause and PMS Center. And she specializes in helping women with these particular health problems. As I speak right now, she is currently writing a book on menopause and osteoporosis. She also teaches healthcare providers throughout this country and gives seminars on these particular problems on menopause and PMS. So she has a lot of knowledge to give us today. For any of you women out there that are suffering right now with, say, menopause or PMS, or maybe you have osteoporosis and you've taken a bone density test and it hasn't come out too favorable, well, listen up. And again, for you women out there that are not having any problems and you want to prevent yourself from having these particular problems, we have some very valuable information. So listen up as Dr. Simpson and I discuss these particular problems. Dr. Simpson, welcome to the program today.
Thank you, Dr. Dietrich.
What a pleasure having you here today.
Pleasure to be here.
I know we can talk for hours and hours and hours. Let's start off with, everybody wants to hear about menopause. What about menopause? How can we say, what should we do for menopause?
Well, there is a big fuss about menopause because women are, just the amount of information that's out there today. Mm-hmm. There's a glut of advertising for medications, and tons of studies. You read in the paper every day about different studies saying estrogen is going to cause breast cancer, estrogen is not going to cause breast cancer. So there are a lot of things that women have to think about at menopause.
Now, is menopause a natural process, though?
It's a natural process. But there are a couple interesting things about menopause today. 100 years ago, women didn't live as long as they do now.
Okay.
So one of the things that we have to think about are the choices that we make now are going to determine the quality of life that we're going to have as we age, as well as whether or not we're going to have our independence. And when a woman makes these choices at menopause, whether she's taking hormones or not taking hormones, there's always this nagging question, am I making the right choice?
Exactly. Now, you hear so many women taking, say, estrogen and things like that. And there's estrogen, testosterone, all of these hormones, DHEA. I mean, we can go on and on with these particular hormones. What about, let's just talk about estrogen, because I know so many women they need to take estrogen, or they think they need to take estrogen. What is the bottom line here for our viewers out there? What should they know about that?
Estrogen, there's not really a bottom line, so to speak. Every woman has to be looked at individually.
All right.
And that is one of the main differences often between alternative ways of viewing women, just like in Chinese medicine or certainly like chiropractors, and the Western model, which typically has been that every woman is given Premarin and Provera, which are two hormones. As we talk about hormones a little bit later on the show, I'll talk about, but I'm not, if women are going to be given hormones, mm-hmm. those two in particular, I would not recommend for menopause.
Okay.
So estrogen is, and the big thing about estrogen in terms of symptoms, hot flashes are one of the symptoms that give some women an enormous amount of problems. Some women have as many as 50 hot flashes a day, and I'm not talking about just a little warming trend. Uh-huh. I'm talking about a drenching sweat, and that can really, or at night, it can happen at night, and then they're woken up and they're not getting enough sleep. Emotionally, a lot of women, it can affect them in that way. So estrogen is important, but whether or not one takes estrogen is also an important question too, because you know as well as I do all of the information about breast cancer out there.
Absolutely. Now, when does the use of Western medicine actually make sense then? Or we're talking about some alternatives, and we got Western medicine alternatives here. How do we separate them? Or let me pose this question. Western medicine, when does it make sense?
Western medicine makes sense a lot of the time. And you know, it's interesting because as a chiropractor, I was never going to use estrogen myself. I certainly was never going to recommend any medication for anybody.
Right, exactly.
But I've learned that there's a place for it. And we
Sure.
I think all of us have to kind of get to a more midline approach.
Absolutely.
However, things like Premarin, and I will talk about that a little bit now, I don't think is really appropriate for treating symptoms of menopause. But when Western medicine does make sense is, say, a woman has severe depression. I'm not talking about mild depression, because there have been many studies that just getting a woman to exercise can
Sure.
actually cure some types of depression. There are heavy bleeding situations.
Sure.
And that type of a situation often is going to require medical intervention.
Okay.
Severe osteoporosis, where a woman is, I had one patient, for instance, come into my office, and what she did was she turned to the side and sneezed. She broke 4 bones.
Wow.
So that requires immediate attention.
Absolutely.
And that's where Western medicine is an incredible gift.
Okay, so in other words, when these patients have these particular symptoms that are, say, way out of hand, that's when we should kick in Western medicine and maybe we should do something about it at
That's
that
right.
particular point.
And evaluating each person, each woman individually again to see, for instance, we'll talk about this too, but what her bone status is like. Because again, as I was saying earlier, we're living so much longer.
Sure.
And our bodies evolutionarily haven't really caught up with that.
Exactly.
So some of us are living into the 90s and maybe even to 100. And just a quick story here, my aunt lived until she was 102.
Great.
Her brain function, she actually started painting when she was 90.
Wow.
But she was in a nursing home for 10 or 15 years, last 10, 15 years of her life because of the multiple fractures from osteoporosis.
Mm-hmm.
So she was 5'8", and when I was younger, and I think she was something like 5'2", when she finally died
Amazing.
at 102. Yeah.
So it sounds like then women out there for our viewing audience then probably should consider maybe taking, say, a bone density test. And that sounds like something that's really important, isn't it?
To me, it's really important, and frankly, it's one of the reasons I really got into all this, because I have low bone mass, and I found out when I was 42, and I'm almost 52 now. So
You
yes,
look great, by the way.
you. I feel great. Menopause, by the way, despite all the things that we're talking about, is a wonderful time in life. I mean, when I was younger, I used to sort of equate menopause with death, but the fact is, it's a wonderful time in life. And even though it's a bit confusing right now, but I'm hoping shows like what you're doing here will help, get rid of some of the confusion.
Exactly. That's why we're doing these shows, to get the information out to the people so they can really understand
It's great.
some of these things. Let's talk a little bit. I know we hear about bone density tests, and I'm sure some of the general public has heard bone density. I don't think they really know what bone density test means. Let's define why a woman should take a bone density test. I know I hear a lot about it. I recommend it to a lot of women. I know it come into my practice. So what actually, for our viewers out there, when should they start taking a bone density test, and what is a bone density test?